Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more overly sarcastic productions. This time, Miscellaneous Myths Actaeon. Don't believe I've heard of this. The name is not ringing any bells. But before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box. Would love it if you join the Discord. Now, let's go ahead and just hear the story of Actaeon.
The major well-known figures in Greek mythology are famous for all sorts of things. Heracles for his strength, Odysseus for his cunning, Atalanta for her speed and kick-ass Tarzan origin story, Tantalus and Sisyphus for their unique punishments in Hades, Clytemnestra for axe-murdering her husband. The list goes on. Some are good, some are bad, some are pretty cool, and some are frankly kind of embarrassing. I mean, nobody wants to be immortalized as that guy who got squished by a boat, Jason. But in the tumultuous annals of mythology,
Take that, Jason.
history, surprisingly few heroes are remembered only for how they died. In fact, I can only think of one, a particularly unlucky dude by the name of Actaeon. Now, Actaeon is a little tricky to talk about. Instead of being referenced in only one story or source, he's one of those guys who seems to have been kind of a meme in ancient Greece. He gets referenced all over the place, but a lot of those references are pretty light on the details, more of a get a load of this guy than a let me tell you a tale. The most complete version of his story is recounted in Ovid's Metamorphoses, but it pops up in a lot of earlier literature as a cautionary tale, typically framed as don't disrespect the gods or you'll end up like Actaeon. Funnily enough, those early references don't actually agree on what Actaeon did wrong. In Euripides' play The Bacchae back in the 400s BCE,
I'm the greatest hunter ever, bar none.
Actaeon is cited as a hunter who boasts that he's a better hunter than Artemis, and it's a major no-no to do that in general, so he's devoured by his own hounds. But about 100 years later, the poet Callimachus says in his hymn number 5 that Actaeon accidentally sees Artemis bathing, and since it's a major no-no to behold a deity naked, he's devoured by his own hounds. Then a little after the turn of the millennium,
Alright, so far, 2 for 2. Artemis kills him with the hounds.
Pseudo-Apollodorus' Bibliotheca gives us a sprinkling of detail where it
Square your shoulders, and remember to keep your hubris in check. I got it.
specifies that Actaeon is a hunter trained by Chiron who makes the mistake of
I have this boyfriend.
wooing Semele, girlfriend of Zeus and future mother of Dionysus. This is naturally a bad idea, and at Zeus's command, Actaeon is devoured by his own hounds. So Apollodorus does say, however, that this is an unusual telling, and the more popular version of the story is that, like in Callimachus' version, Actaeon's real offense is seeing Artemis bathing, at which point she turns him into a deer, and then he's devoured by his own hounds. The hounds are then confused when they can't
They never listen about this hubris thing.
find Actaeon and go to Chiron, who figures out the sad story from context clues and carves a statue of Actaeon so the dogs feel better about the whole situation. Now, we're starting to see the faintest hint of a pattern emerging here, but these anecdotal references don't really paint a full picture just yet. For one thing, they don't agree on literally anything other than Actaeon's death. Actaeon is a hunter who pisses off at least one god and is devoured by his own hounds, either explicitly at the god's orders or apparently
But here's the thing, though. 3 out of the 4, Artemis.
because that's just a thing that happens. What did he do? Nobody can agree. Which god did he anger? Who's to say? How did he die? Okay, that one we've got down. Now, when discussing Actaeon, most people tend to go with Ovid's version, written in the same general 1st century CE timeframe as Pseudo-Apollodorus' telling, mostly because it is the only version longer than 3 sentences. In Ovid's version, Actaeon is, say it with me now, a hunter. He and his hunter bros have
Bye, guys. Same time tomorrow.
had a long and productive day of hunting, and they're packing it in for the evening and heading home. But unbeknownst to Actaeon, the goddess Artemis happens to have a private grotto nearby where she likes to go and unwind after a long day's hunting with the gals. And unfortunately for Actaeon, he happens to stumble on said private grotto right after Artemis has popped into the water for a nice, refreshing, no-clothes-needed bath. Now, as you may know,
Homeric hymn to Aphrodite. But there are 3 words whose friends she cannot win over or deceive. The first is the daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, bright-eyed Athena, for she takes no pleasure in the things done by golden Aphrodite. What does please her is wars, and what is done by Ares, battles and fighting, as well as the preparation of splendid pieces of craftsmanship. The second is the renowned Artemis, she of the golden shafts. Never has she been subdued in love-making by Aphrodite, lover of smiles, for she takes pleasure in the bow and arrows, and the killing of wild beasts in the mountains, as well as lyres, groups of singing dancers, and high-pitched shouts of celebration. The third one, not to take pleasure in the things done by Aphrodite, is that young maiden full of Eidos, Hestia, who was the firstborn child of Kronos. She was the lady who was wooed by Poseidon and Apollo, which she was quite unwilling, firmly refused.
Artemis is distinguished in the Olympian pantheon as one of the virgin goddesses whose single status was more than just a personal choice, but also actively sacred. So a dude seeing her naked, accidentally or otherwise, isn't just uncool, it's kinda also sacrilegious. Artemis's nymphs freak out at the
Yeah, I'm just gonna go.
But Artemis quickly handles the situation by hucking a handful of water at Actaeon and cursing him to silence so he can never tell anyone about this breach of her privacy. The way she does this is by transforming him into a stag.
Watch where you're going next time. Poof.
Which are famously known for not being able to talk. Actaeon freaks out and bolts into the woods, but makes the rookie mistake of being shaped like a deer at the time, and every hunting dog in the zip code perks up and bolts after him. Actaeon is eventually run down and devoured by his own hounds. What a twist. So, this is one of those cases where the story has a lot of recurring elements, but not every telling has all of those elements, which sometimes indicates that the story underwent an almost organic transformation and evolution over time, starting from a quote-unquote original version before branching and speciating into different versions that each retained individual.
Accidentally sees Artemis's Bonkongonagoogs. Accidentally sees Artemis and her posse's Dabarhunkaroos.
Parts of that original. But it sometimes indicates that the story was always a cluster of other very different stories with only a central point as overlap. To determine which of those things happened here, we need a broader look at the story, one that we can't necessarily find in written works, which we've basically exhausted at this point. Luckily for us, referencing Actaeon was just
Photos referenced from the Warbird Institute Iconographic Database, which has an incredibly comprehensive database of Actaeon imagery.
as popular with artists as it was with poets, and Actaeon shows up in visual media all the time, which can give us a pretty good insight into what elements of the story may have been popular at different times. For instance, earlier versions didn't seem to have Actaeon turning into a deer. In fact, visual representations from the 400s BCE up to the turn of the millennium mostly seem to show Actaeon fully human when he's chased down by his hounds. It's only around the aughts CE that there starts to be an uptick in representations where Actaeon appears to be partially transformed into a deer during the attack. There's a painting of him in Pompeii from the 1st century BCE where he's got little antlers, but before that, he's almost always human. It's not until the Renaissance, a full 1,000 years after Rome, that the artists start leaning on the Actaeon as a deer imagery super heavily, which is also coincidentally when artists started giving us an eyeful of Artemis bathing, evidently missing the entire point of Ovid's telling in the process. Most of the earlier art also only shows Actaeon as a lone figure being killed, with no sign of which god he might have offended to make that happen. A few pieces of the art from that early Roman era feature a woman, probably Artemis, looking pretty cranky but usually, though not always, fully clothed. In some cases, other gods appear to be present, generally disapproving of Actaeon's vibes. In at least one, it looks like
Your vibes, bro. Not passing the check.
Artemis is chasing him down with a spear while other women are bathing nearby. So looking at all this, it seems like the reason we can't find one specific original telling to treat as the real one is because, as is so often the case, there never was one. The only consistent thing about Actaeon was that he pissed off the gods and was devoured by his own hounds. What exactly he did, which god or gods were responsible for his death, whether or not he was deer-shaped at the time, changed. It was most commonly related to Artemis, and more commonly because of the bath, but considering the variety of tellings, it probably only got locked into the cultural zeitgeist as Actaeon copped an eyeful of Artemis's secret maidenhood and she decided not to be cool about it because Ovid's version was the easiest to access and Renaissance artists were weird like that.
Hold on.
Version was the
what
easiest to
fucking-
access and Renaissance artists were weird.
Titian's tips. If you want to see boobs, you can just paint someone.
Like that.
It's got to be rough dying in such a noteworthy way that it totally eclipses all the other stuff you did. Depending on the version, the moral shifts between truly the whims of the gods are a terrible thing to face. Don't be creepy and you won't get devoured by your own hounds. Ask me about Actaeon Orion conspiracy theory. I'm kind of curious about that. And that was Miscellaneous Myths Actaeon. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.